What's up, guys? If you're wondering why it looks different, it's because this is a different place. This is not my dorm room. This is my bedroom at home. But that's not important. What is important is if it fits your macros. IIFYM, as they say. That seems to be what everybody's talking about nowadays. You know, if it fits your macros, does it work? Well, we'll get into that a little bit later, but for those of you who have seen a bunch of these videos about if it fits your macros already, this is not going to be like just one of those another bodybuilder endorsing if it fits your macros. Although I do diet like this, I do use if it fits your macros as a guide. I won't endorse it wholeheartedly, and I'll tell you why a little bit later. But basically, what if it fits your macros is, it's a method of dieting where it's based on the principle that each person, depending on their goals, like let's say if you're bulking, obviously you want to be in a caloric surplus, and then if you're cutting, you want to be in a caloric deficit. But it's the idea that each person has a certain number of calories that they should have for their goal, and then along with that calorie goal, they should have a certain number of grams of protein, number of grams of carbs, number of grams of fat. Macros is because it's based on macronutrient ratio. So let's say you have 30% of calories from protein, 50% of calories from carbs, and 20% from fat, or something like that. And then the way that works is just that you would take your total number of calories, multiply it by the percentage. So let's say, like, if you wanted to have 20% of your calories of 2,000 from protein, you would just take 2,000 calories times 0.20 for 20%, and that'll get you the number of calories from protein. And then you just divide by 4 grams, 4 calories per gram of protein, and then you'd have your total grams of protein per day. And you do the same thing for carbs and fat, depending on your percentages. And then, in case you forgot or if you didn't know, carbs is 4 calories per gram, fat is 9 calories per gram. So that's basically the way it works. And I will say now that if it fits your macros, it does work in the sense that it is effective at building a physique, whether it be bulking or cutting. It does work for that if you do it correctly, if you know what you're doing. And a lot of that just comes down to kind of just tweaking your macros and getting used to, or kind of learning how your body reacts to different macronutrient ratios. And then obviously the caloric deficit and caloric surplus comes into play. But the next question, I guess, it would be whether or not you should use if it fits your macros as your method of dieting. And I would say yes, but you should also know that there are a few things that if it fits your macros doesn't account for. And then we'll go through the list. I have a list over here on my computer. The first thing is for proteins. Obviously you have a number of grams of protein that you're trying to intake for that day, or for each day. But that doesn't really account for the source of protein. And you might not think that's important, but it kind of is, because when you eat protein, any source of protein, it's going to go through your digestive system. And a protein is basically a long chain of, they're called amino acids. And there are a total of 22 amino acids, right? And 9 of them are considered essential amino acids, 13 of them are considered non-essential. And what that means is that basically the essential amino acids are ones that your body can't produce on its own, and then non-essential amino acids are the ones that your body, if it needs to, can break down other proteins or other amino acids to create those. But regardless of what your source of protein is, it's going to go in your mouth, and then it's going to get digested and broken out into these individual amino acids. And then later on it'll be used to build up other proteins for muscle or whatever. But the reason that your protein sources are important is that some protein sources are complete protein sources, which means they have all of the amino acids, whereas some are incomplete protein sources, meaning that they only have some of the amino acids. And basically, it's real simple. Your complete protein sources are meat and dairy, and that's about it. And then your incomplete protein sources are basically everything else. So like soy, any kind of plant protein, I don't know, protein from like oatmeal and stuff like that. Those are all incomplete protein sources. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you shouldn't eat incomplete protein sources. It's just that if you do, try to eat a variety of them so you do get all of your amino acids. Just because if you have all of your amino acids, your body doesn't have to break down its other proteins or its other amino acids to build up other things. And then that brings us to our next item on the list, which is carbs. And the main issue for most people with carbs is they think that there's some issue with the glycemic index or glycemic load, or like simple versus complex carbs, which, I mean, it kind of makes sense, but I will say that I don't think it actually matters, and here's why. When you eat carbs, whether it be like oatmeal or even if it was like pure sugar, doesn't matter what it is, it's going to go in your mouth and it's going to get broken down into glucose. At some point, whatever your source of carbs is, it'll get broken down into glucose or a similar monosaccharide. And then from there, it'll get absorbed into your bloodstream. And what'll happen then is, obviously there's going to be glucose floating around in your blood, which will mean that you have a higher blood sugar level than normal. And the issue that most people have is that if you eat something sugary, like a simple carb, your blood sugar will spike higher and faster than if you were to have eaten a complex carb. It won't spike as high, and it won't stay. But I mean, it won't spike as high, but it will be more like a sustained blood sugar increase. But it doesn't really matter either way because your body has a way of regulating that. So what happens? Basically, when your glucose or your blood glucose rises, your pancreas kind of detects that, and it releases the hormone insulin. And a lot of you probably already know what insulin is, but it's just a hormone that it tells your body to store excess glucose or excess blood sugar as glycogen in your muscles and liver, and then if there's anything left over, basically it'll be stored as fat. Your body basically regulates your blood sugar on its own, so you don't really have to worry about that. If you really, really wanted to, you could go ahead and eat sugar all day. But the only thing that doesn't account for, and that If It Fits Your Macros doesn't account for, is fiber. And the reasons that fiber are important is because fiber in your intestine, it will help to prevent some absorption of cholesterol, and it'll also it promotes the secretion of mucus throughout your digestive tract, which just allows everything to kind of move through a little bit smoother. Which that kind of sounds weird, but it is very important. And then for fiber, the DRV, the daily recommended value for fiber, is about 25 grams per 2,000 calories. But I would say if you can, I would say make that 25 grams a minimum for every day. And if you go over, if you go like 30 to 40 grams, you're probably fine. Because, I mean, a lot of you guys out there probably aren't dieting, whether you're bulking or cutting, you probably aren't dieting on 2,000 calories. And then the next item on our list is going to be fats. Fats, just like everything else on If It Fits Your Macros, you have a certain number, but you do need to pay attention to whether it's saturated or unsaturated fats. And basically the difference is saturated fats are, they're solid at room temperature, so like the fat that you would see on like meat, like steak, or fat and butter, those are both solid at room temperature. And then unsaturated fats are liquid at room temperature, so things like oils. And the reason that you want to avoid saturated fats is that it increases your risk of higher blood pressure, things like blood clots, and basically later on it'll increase your risk for higher blood pressure, things like atherosclerosis and heart attack, heart disease, all that bad stuff. And the same thing with cholesterol. You don't actually need to eat any cholesterol. Your body produces cholesterol on its own, but the 300 milligram DRV for cholesterol that's basically like a maximum cap. That's the most that you want to eat in a day. And realistically, most people are probably eating more than that, but I mean, obviously you want to moderate your cholesterol, because it's the same thing as saturated fats basically, is that it increases the chance of blood clots, hypertension, high blood pressure, same thing. And then later on in life, heart disease and stroke, heart attacks, and none of those things are good, obviously. And then the last thing on the list is micronutrients. So if you're doing If It Fits Your Macros, you do want to you don't necessarily need to track your macros, but you do want to make sure you're hitting your minimums for your DRVs for things like vitamins and minerals. So I mean, like, as long as you're eating like a few fruits and vegetables every day, you should be okay. And then if you feel like you're under, or if you do track your macros and you end up being under, then you can always add a multivitamin. So the bottom line is that If It Fits Your Macros does work for the sake of developing a physique, but you shouldn't abuse it. Because I mean, obviously, like, there's a lot of people, when you're bulking, your fats are really high, you probably fit in fast food every single day. But that's not And we all know that's not healthy. Like even if you're hitting your macros and you're making progress in terms of your physique, that doesn't mean you're healthy. And I mean, like, what good is having a nice physique if you have like complications, like health complications when you're 30 years old? It's no good, you know? So I think a lot of us, a lot of my generation of bodybuilders or fitness people, whatever you want to call yourselves, a lot of us tend to sort of ignore these bad effects because I mean to be honest, we all know that they exist. Like we all know about the risk of heart disease and things like that, but we tend to sort of ignore them, or we just don't acknowledge them because we feel like around our age we're sort of like invincible, you know. And to a certain extent that's true, because we can eat however we want basically, and right now it's not going to affect us. Like our blood pressure isn't going to go up right now, but when we're like 30 or 40 or 50 or whatever, and we're suffering from all kinds of lifestyle related diseases, then that's when we regret it. And you know, there's really nothing you can do. Like you can't undo what you did like 20 years ago. So I think if you're gonna do, if it fits your macros, or regardless of how you're dieting, you should be mindful of all these things about like complete versus incomplete proteins, carbohydrates. Be mindful of your fiber intake, and fats. Keep in mind the saturated versus unsaturated. And as long as you can, for you bodybuilders who are doing it for 50 macros, as long as you can hit your numbers and make sure you're getting the proper nutrition, then you should be set in terms of building a physique and staying healthy. And I think that's about it. So thanks for watching, guys. I know this was a long video, but you know, it's information that I need to get out there. And there's nothing else, so just comment, rate, and subscribe, and if you have time, go check out my other videos. Thanks.